We are recording. This is everyone, myself, and Melody. Go, Melody.
People treat addiction as if it should be a topic for arguments. Families of addicts and social media lovers are especially guilty of disputing the medical community on addiction being a disease. To put it simply, the topic is not one that is up in the air. Addiction is a disease. Medical journals and addiction specialists alike state repeatedly that addiction is a disease that requires treatment, much like cancer or arthritis. While addiction begins with the choice to take that first shot or do that first line of cocaine, after that initial decision is made, the addiction takes hold from there. Being the child of two addicts, I can tell you firsthand that nothing short of a life-altering medical condition could turn people from angels to just the opposite so quickly. The world has finally begun to acknowledge the epidemic that drug use and trade have become, but the people of the world are still struggling to understand just how much more pressing the issue of addiction is. The goal I hope to achieve this evening is to clear that up and encourage my audience to take action in their community. The choice made to use their drug of choice is one that should be remembered but not held against addicts. Much like a stranger in the supermarket bumping their shoulder against yours, addicts are taken back when they realize that they are just that, addicted. The definition of addiction, according to drugabuse.org, is a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug-seeking, continued use despite harmful consequences, and long-lasting changes in the brain. Every one of us has a relative, friend, or movie character they think of when they hear jargon like chronic or relapsing. I ask you to think of that person now. Does this person suffer from an illness? If the answer is yes, do you blame them for their condition? Diseases are treatable, but much of the time completely incurable. Addiction is no exception. Addiction to heroin, for example, the drug that hit the nation harder than ever before in the 1960s, changes the physical structure and physiology of the brain, creating long-term imbalances in neuronal and hormonal systems that are not easily reversed. Heroin addiction can also lead to problems in sexuality in men, mental disorders, and the most extreme, lengthy withdrawals of any drug that has been found up to current day. After reading pages and pages of complications, withdrawal symptoms, and potentially life-threatening side effects of heroin use, the fact that addiction is never something someone would choose became glaringly obvious. I do not know a single person who would purposely put themselves through potential lung collapse and heart attacks. While the definition of addiction alone should have obvious similarities to a disease to anyone who has experienced one, when you compare the two side to side, the similarities are impossible to ignore. According to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition of a disease is a condition of the living animal or plant body, or one of its parts, that impairs normal functioning and is typically manifested by distinguishing signs and symptoms. Type 2 diabetes is a disease that can be either genetic or caused by an unhealthy lifestyle. In the instance of an unhealthy lifestyle causing this disease, a poor diet causes your body to build up a resistance to insulin. The human body requires insulin to stay alive, so eating in a way that causes the body to stop producing it is irresponsible and completely avoidable. However, when someone gets diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they can take their insulin and avoid eating things that will cause their blood sugar to fluctuate too much in one direction or another. In cases where type 2 diabetes is caused by poor diet, it is perfectly avoidable, and yet people still make questionable decisions and put themselves and their relatives through unnecessary stress. Addiction is a disease that is kickstarted by one poor life choice, but it can be driven by hereditary curses if addiction runs in your family. Some people can try cocaine just once and never touch it again, while others are hooked from their very first high. Addiction is very situational. When an addict begins an addiction, the smallest of doses can achieve the greatest of highs. A few years later, however, if regular usage has continued, it will require a much greater amount to achieve that same high. When an addict hits rock bottom and decides to get clean, there are steps and medicine they can take to help ease them off the drugs. With regular treatment and diligence, it is not and not using drugs again, an addict can go into remission and never use drugs again. With the right attitude and help, lifelong addictions bound to lead to eventual overdoses are completely avoidable. Friends and family of addicts could be spared heartache by a simple decision made by the addict. The diseases of diabetes and addiction have shocking resemblances, and yet diabetics are looked at as ill and addicts are looked at as ignorant and downright stupid. If society wants addiction rates to lower, we must be willing to offer help to addicts without all of the attached stigma of, this guy threw his life away for a drug that most of us will never even consider taking. What an idiot. Addiction is avoidable, but it is also treatable. And Americans need to stop treating the two like one is better than the other. Addiction is a disease. Doctors agree, treatment centers agree, and addicts agree. I hope after tonight you understand why.
Hooray! Good job.